Hey class, welcome to week 5 of the Structure of Information course. I hope everybody's having a great start to their week. Thank you all for your continued work on the assignments, and I'll be grading that shortly if I haven't done so already. We're going to get right into the lecture this week. Let me share my screen. This week we're going to be talking about searching for information and a lot about Google and how they started, ethical issues, and things like that. So in the reading, we learned about our information behavior, and there's two different types of information behaviors. There's information we don't seek. So for example, here, it's when you go down a Wikipedia rabbit hole at like 3 a.m., which I often find myself doing, and then know the entire history of a tribe of people or a Game of Thrones character. So if you watch the Game of Thrones show, it gets it's in depth, but imagine the books are way more in depth, and he hasn't even finished writing the endings yet. And it goes way in, like, a lot of stuff. And so that's when you don't really look for that information. Like, I've just wanted a recap about who is this person on Game of Thrones because it gets confusing, and then I start reading an hour later about the whole history of Targaryens or something. In the above case, this is called passive because we just stumbled on it. It could also be direct if we're researching for a paper and find information we didn't seek. So if we're doing a paper on like cars and related, we find out information about a history of airplanes because GM was involved in it or something like that. There's also information that we tend to avoid. When Endgame came out a few years ago, there was a whole thing with how do they beat Thanos, and there was some crazy memes involving Ant-Man or whatever. And I remember my best friend he deleted Instagram. He's Instagram addicted. TikTok wasn't that big then, or didn't even exist. He was addicted to social media. He deleted it. He deleted Twitter. He didn't want to know how it ended. He even made a verbal threat to people who ruined it for him. I'm not a Marvel guy, so I couldn't spoil it. From the reading, there's a quote about this. It says, sometimes people will avoid information if paying attention to it will cause mental discomfort or something like that. So what does that mean? It means that something is upsetting to you. Something is, you don't want it, you avoid it on purpose. One of the things that people always say that bothers me when they do as a former journalist is when a person says, I don't watch the news, it's all bad, and it puts me in a mood. Okay, yeah, the news prioritizes crime and things like that, but how will you know what's going on if you don't watch the news? For example, if there's a major storm, how would you even know that happened if you don't watch the news? I mean, if especially for older people who don't use social media like that. So for today's weekly prompt, and this is the gif here of Grandpa Simpson when he comes in and he leaves because he doesn't want to see it. You know, if you know this meme, you know. For this weekly prompt, I want you to tell me about a time you avoided information and why. Or was it someone you knew? Did they I remember back in the days with VCRs, people would record novellas and didn't want to like know what happened, or playoff games, and would tune everybody out till they got home in the tape. And I think there's a show where the guy looks to watch it and the wife taped over with a soap opera of the sports game. So all of our information needs are different. Even if we were to examine the same thing based on our prior experiences and things like that, our needs are different. So for example, let's use this class because you guys have to read those things and I have to read them too. And a couple of times I'm deleting them for you because they're super boring. They're just irrelevant, dull, and I replace them with what I feel is better readings. But anyway, as a student for this class, you mainly have to read the material to pass test and do good on the papers. As a professor on this class, I have different information needs. I have to take a closer eye to the readings. I have to find other YouTube videos, examples, memes that are more relatable and make it easier for you to understand. So even though we might read the same thing or research the same thing, the outcomes are different. And just like our needs, the reasons why we look for information can change. It could be our demographics, our personal experience and knowledge, our thoughts, our feelings, our criteria for search evaluation, our actions, our information sources, and our context. All of these things could change the reasons why we look for information. So I'm trying to think of a good example. So when we talk about demographics, two different groups of people looking for the same information might have two different needs of wanting that information. So, example, as a local New Yorker, you maybe want to look at the traffic, or people who are local New Yorkers, sorry about that. Maybe you want to avoid the traffic that's happening in the city, and somebody else as a tourist is examining something else related to the traffic, what bus they can take to get to the museum. So information seeking is so important that UNESCO in 2005 described information literacy as an important tool for national and international development. They said it was so important that everybody should have access to it. It's a basic human right, especially in the digital world, and promotes social inclusion in all nations. And basic information literacy in the digital world is super important. So here's a good example. In Iran, they have the protests now due to the hijab laws and things like that. What is the government doing? They're turning off the internet. Why? Because the internet's how everybody gets their information. They think about it in these other countries, sorry, they control the media. They control the newspaper. They have censorship laws, the TV. So people can talk freely in even in undiscreet channels that are not monitored about hey, there's a protest going on. Hey, we're gonna go rally at this corner. Meet me here. They shut it off. And usually what the governments do overseas is first they start with the social media. First they start with the social media, and then if that doesn't work, they shut off the internet completely. A complete internet blackout is when they pull the plug. And it does happen in certain countries. So everything we have learned about information literacy, but in the digital context, digital literacy. It's a big part of that is knowing when to use digital source versus a non-digital source. So here's something that I mentioned last class, and with the viewfinder thing, with the real thing that I showed you guys that picture when I was working in the newsroom. If I really want to report, sorry, on a ghost story from the 70s, but my Google searches aren't hitting, they didn't archive that information. It's not there. The newsroom hasn't exported that from old microfilm onto the web. So how do I research that? If you really want to do an in-depth job for things like this, and when you become a researcher or journalist, you're going to have to go into archives and libraries and courts and pull out actual files. You have to do that. It's not online. Remember that old microfilm example that I gave you guys. So now we're going to go and talk about online searches, what we all do here. So we have different terms as went over into the readings. The internet is how computers connect. The web is how they talk to each other. It's an organized system to help us. Browsers help us navigate the web. And of course, search engines help us with the browsers. There's a quick video I want you guys to watch here. Talks about how Google works and searches.
Hi, my name is John.
So for the sake of not watching a blurry recast video, just pause this video, Google this, and watch it. Code.org on YouTube, the internet, how search works. I'll leave it for 2 minutes so you guys can get it. All right, moving on. So the podcast that you guys heard talks about how important the search engines work. And that's another video to give you a recap. But now SEO is so important. So SEO is search engine optimization. It's basically how people can sort of manipulate or get their search up quicker for web results. And there's people whose jobs are just this, to change headlines, to make tags, to make their articles pop in Google searches. And Google is always changing their algorithm to when people figure it out. Here's a good example of when I was a journalist, and theoretical example as well. Let's say something happened in downtown New Brunswick, and two people were robbed, and I wanted more people to read my story, right? And for the headline, I put 2 people robbed at gunpoint. Okay. It's already in the New Brunswick newspaper theoretically, right? So it's not good, because how are you going to identify it if you want to have search terms that pull in? So a better way to do it is to put two people robbed at gunpoint in New Brunswick near Rutgers. Even though Rutgers has nothing to do with it, just by their proximity, that is going to help you pull better searches and get more clicks. And then you also work with the subheader. You work with the number of times you use a certain term. There's a whole bunch of tricks on this. People take online classes just to better this and to make their blogs pop. This is an actual skill. And you kind of, as a journalist, I learned a little bit of it, but it was years ago and it's gotten way more in depth. So let's talk about the limitations with online searching, as I referred to in the previous slide. The things that are not archived. What about the things that are but are hard to reach? Remember, they have the uncrawled web or the unknown web. So whenever you go online and put in a web address, that's only a small portion of the internet, of the online web. And that's, even though it's so expansive, there's so much more. We'll get to it. I'll give you a good example in a little bit. So this is an old thing from the reading, which talks about how we get online. We need the hardware to work with the software to get online with the telecom company, which this ISP is kind of like outdated because we don't even use AOL no more. The telecom company, Verizon, just gets us online immediately. Then we have the browser, Google, so forth, search engine, and a website. This doesn't even include apps. So going back to what I said before, there's limitations to our online search. Remember last week I gave you an example of Game of Thrones. Sorry if I'm just always relating to Game of Thrones, even though the ending sucked. There's that part. What if that small piece of information about the White Walkers and the daggers, or the, I forgot, Valyrian steel, wasn't in Dragonglass, wasn't in that library? That's how crucial information basically solved Game of Thrones, the dilemma in the show. So think about it like that. If something is not indexed or not included, you could miss out on a lot. A big portion of the web that isn't indexed is called the dark web. So here is an analogy of how big the internet is and how big the dark web is and everything like that. So at the top, you have the main, let me just scroll this down because it's kind of blocking Bing, but Bing is not really, nobody really uses Bing, right? So up here in the small part of the web, Wikipedia, news, all the websites you can access. Then on a way bigger chunk are academic journals and databases. So this would be like if you Google a topic but doesn't come up, and then you have to go into the Rutgers EDU, look at the journals and things like that. Or if you want to search a database in some company or something, voter records, things like that, that are accessible to you but don't easily come up on Google. And then we have the Tor, dark web, black markets, pirated media. It's huge. It's also very dangerous and illegal, not illegal, to go in there, but it started, and it still is, there's a lot of illegal stuff. Gun sales, drug sales, you can hire a hitman. A lot of people are curious about this. And if you don't know what you're doing, I don't advise you to go on that, because it's people that's actually crawling to find your IP address and install spam, ransomware, make you pay money, blackmail you. So please be careful. If you're curious, just Google a video of what it is. Don't actually do it yourself unless you got that computer technology information to do it. So how do we find things that don't come up online? One of the ways we do that is called Boolean search. It's the search operators. It's the site and the two dots, and then we enter, or in text or headline or things like that. In the readings for this week and the videos, I included a video that gave you a lot of cool Google tips and Boolean searches to better organize how you get your searches and find more things directly instead of scrolling nonstop. So we also have the field searching. That's when we go to Google. Let's pull it up. All right, I spent my whole life looking for flights, so that's the first thing that comes up. Let's see here. We have the advanced search. And it's kind of tricky because it doesn't even give you that option right away. You have to Google advanced search to get advanced. So these are the advanced searches, and it makes it if you don't know those terms, you can do this and narrow it down. So let's say you want to find an article in the New York Post about a robbery in the Bronx, right? But how many robberies happen in the Bronx every year? You can limit the date range, you can search for the avenue or the neighborhood or things like that, and you can limit it and make your life way easier. All right, so I wanted to show you guys this funny example of how the search operators can greatly influence searching. Let me go back to the regular Google. All right, so this is the term, and remember, I'm putting quotation marks. This is an actual person's name. And we could just get articles about him. If I didn't put the search operators or the Boolean terms, or I just deleted those two terms without the quotation marks, you would get a lot of other crazy type of searches. So those search operators can save you time and unnecessary things that you don't want to see online. All right, moving along. So here's another good example of how Boolean searches and search operators help you. If you're a detective and the missing persons case are that they have red, blue, and green, and all these people are wearing those things, this is what's going to come up. I think this is from the movie The Usual Suspects. But if you want to find some person who is wearing all of these colors, then if you put the Boolean terms, tie red and shirt blue and so forth, then you'll get the one hit. So this is a good analogy. You can see how just by using the right search terms, you can pull way better information. So when we talk about Google, what are the ethical issues with Google? Is Google a monopoly? Does Google own not the game, but yeah, monopoly is based off the term monopoly, but does it own the whole? Is it search, right? Google is all search. So think about it. Do you consider it a monopoly or not? So the U.S. government says that Google is a monopoly. They've filed a lawsuit against them in 2020 saying that its practices have ruined the competition. This is expected to go to trial next year, by the way. Basically, what it says is that they filed an antitrust lawsuit alleging that the company is too big and has taken a monopoly over smaller rivals. Let me see down here. I think it says it, or I think I have it in the next article for you. Some of the things that they've done. So basically, what it's saying here is that Google's practice. Sorry, do a different article. If you read this more in depth, it tells you what happened with Google. One of the things that Google has done is two main things to search, right? Google pays Apple to have Google as the first search on their iPhone. So think about it. Why isn't Google using Safari on their phone? It's their own app. Because Google pays them so much money to do that. Google thought of an ingenious way to have everybody use Google, right? And what is that? Your phone. Google bought Android years ago and preloaded all their information with Google, right? It's all Google if you have Android phone. And with that, the phones are cheap, right? So think about how many people in the world use Google. How many people in the world are not gonna do the extra effort to download Bing or any of the other search engines like Yahoo? Um, should we care? If Google is so effective at what they do, should I even care about, oh, they own all the searching? If they get me what I need fast, and if I go to Bing and it's confusing, why should I care? What are the biases that Google have? Um, So they can promote, also in the antitrust lawsuit, they can promote their own ads, their own shopping, paid posts and things like that. So besides the regular phrase searching that we just did, that senator's name, think about all the other things Google has taken over and made obsolete. So one of the things in the lawsuit is that Google bought this system from a travel website. And as you see here, I use it so much. The first thing when I even type Google is Google Flights. For me, this is the best website you can use to find any flights. And I've changed my whole plan of traveling just by using the site. So let's say October 15th, payday, you got 3 days off from work, you want to go somewhere. Where should you go? Google will give you the whole entire world on ticket prices, and you can just literally scan and say, hey, I really want to go to Brazil, but it's $600 and I don't got that much. Let's go to Cancun, right? And this was, they bought this search, and by doing this, those websites became obsolete. So now I'm using Google even more. I wouldn't even have been on Google Flights if they didn't have this. I would have been on Skyscanner or something else. What's the other thing that Google took over? The reviews on Google Maps. Let me see here. What are those sandwiches in Rutgers? Are they Fat Boy sandwiches? Am I saying it right? Um, no. Oh, it's the Are You Hungry? Yeah, here it is. Right. So look at this. Google has taken over Maps. They've taken over Yelp. They've taken over other applications. I don't even use Yelp anymore. And Yelp just basically is doing horrible because of Google integrated this into the system, again, making another competitor obsolete. So let's see what the reviews are. I always do the newest. I had this once, but it was just like too much food. It was unnecessary. Um, let's see this. I like reading funny reviews. The sandwich was all bread and dry. Fries like sandpaper. Okay, Google is taking over Yelp. Yelp is basically obsolete. Does anybody still use Yelp? I don't. Let's see what else. Let's search their apps. What else? Oh, Duo. It's a fake FaceTime for Android phones. Again, taking over more things. Calendars. Think about all these apps that are in your daily life that Google has control over. And YouTube. Google. Oh, speaking of Game of Thrones. So Google owns YouTube. There's tons of ads from Google and stuff like that. Um, think about so much content gets loaded onto YouTube. Um, that it's like millions of hours of video every minute gets uploaded to the YouTube. It's insane. There's so much searching, and when we talk about searching, you should always search YouTube for certain topics. You should always search Google Images and things like that. All right, one more thing I wanted to show you about Google, a cool thing. So there's a couple cool like things you can do. If you just type Pac-Man in Google, you can actually play the game in. Yeah, so you guys don't want to watch me play that. Another thing that's cool is Google Trends, and it tells you what's the things that are coming, are what people are Googling the most. So let's see what this. So Taylor Swift versus Kim Kardashian. Let's see the weather because there's a storm. Let's put hurricane. I think it's Ian. You can see nobody even bothered searching this term Ian, right? For months. Then all of a sudden, when it was mentioned in the news, boom, it goes up a lot. And all the searches are coming from mostly Florida, from DC, Wyoming. I don't know, Wyoming is concerned by Ian. DC, a lot of policymakers and things like that. So you can play around with this and find out what things, what's trending. Queen Elizabeth was trending, NBA, WNBA playoffs and things like that. Recently trending Aaron Judge, Snoop Dogg. What's going on with Snoop Dogg? He's always involved in something. National Coffee Day is trending, and so forth. So, what are the other ethical issues with Google? It's not as clear cut. It's not, you know, not right in your face. It's something that you have to actually think about, and it has to deal with a lot of media and tech companies. So, what happens to a system when most of the people that build the system are of a certain background? So, most of the people who program and code for Google are all white males or a lot of Asian males. Google has some racist things that they have come up. Um, Before I scroll down, I'm going to skip a part. There's a really graphic part about this that shows you what happens if you Google it. There's the term black girls, and I think it's so bad that I don't even want to show you guys. So I'm just going to skip it. But if you see it when I scroll down, then just sorry for disclaimer warning. And there's some other good examples in here. So this guy tweeted, and this was a couple of years ago. He said he Googled 3 black teenagers, and what came up was mugshots, as opposed to Googling 3 white teenagers and his kids playing ball. That's just outright racism. And as he says here, after he complained, I think they fixed it. What are some other examples? This is crazy. This is the biggest media, one of the biggest media companies in the world, right? Unprofessional hairstyles for work. Why is it showing hairstyles of like African American black people? And why are the professional ones white people? How does that even make sense? Who determines that, right? The problem is the Google algorithms haven't caught up to accounting for biases. And there's some other examples here. One of the readings that you had you guys read talks about mentions, and you can look up it further. If you just put in certain terms, you know how Google gives you the preemptive text, and if you just put like certain races, it'll give you like really racist things. Google is trying to fix it, but at the heart of it is what I mentioned earlier, the diversity. We need more diversity in the hiring and creating of these websites to be more inclusive for everybody. So here's another thing that could happen and is happening in another country. What would happen if they looked at our web searches? What happened if Google was owned by the government? And as you'll see here, it's crazy. They're monitoring you day and night, and you can be in prison and things like that. And this is going on in China. So first of all, I know we have a lot of Chinese students in this class, and apologies that I'm always using China as an example, but they're one of the countries in this day and age that are really censoring the internet for people, and it's a case study in modern times. So for the sake of, again, not letting you guys watch this blurry, grainy video, I have this up for you here. I'm gonna quit my video and just watch this video and think about it. Hope you guys have a good week. I look forward to reading your examples in the assignment, and I'll see you guys next week.